I'm Grace Ellison, 33 years old, and I can still feel the sting of my sister's palm on my cheek. It happened at my own dinner table in Seattle, a night I meant for truce that collapsed in a breath. Brooke stood up, shoved me toward the door, and my parents watched without a word as the latch clicked behind me. The house my grandparents left me sat at the center of it, like a lit match in dry grass. Under the streetlight, lip bleeding and keys shaking in my hand, I understood something had ended and something else was about to begin. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from and what time you pressed play tonight. If you've ever had to stand your ground in your own family, tap, like, and subscribe so this story finds the people who need it. I grew up in the shadow of a small back porch and a bigger garden, the place where my grandmother June taught me patience by thinning seedlings and my grandfather Walter taught me logic by tracing wires across a creaky workbench. They believed in tidy work, plain truth, and leaving things better than you found them. I carried those lessons into adulthood, writing code for a living, counting my wins quietly, and paying my bills on time. The little craftsman house they loved became mine after they were gone, a responsibility that felt less like a gift and more like a promise. In my parents' home, praise was rarer than noise unless it had Brooke's name on it, and money moved in ways I didn't always see until it disappeared. She got the newer things, the bigger chances, the softer landings. I picked up extra shifts and made do, telling myself it was fine because I could stand on my own feet. When I needed a computer for a summer program, I found a second-hand one with a missing key and learned to type around the gap. When college bills came due, I coded late into the night and taught myself to live with the hum of old appliances and the thin walls of small apartments. The quiet I kept was not agreement. It was survival. By the time the dinner rolled around, my life had a rhythm. A modest place in the city, steady work and weekend trips to tend the roses at the house my grandparents left behind. I cooked their Sunday lasagna in my small kitchen and set the table like they used to, hoping the familiar smell might warm more than the room. Elaine set a store dessert by the sink and talked about traffic. Martin asked for a beer and not much else, and Brooke walked through my door like a guest who owned the place. Conversation skimmed easy topics until it didn't. Until the house came up in that casual tone families use when the decision has already been made without you. They called it a family place, a better fit for someone who was starting over, and the room felt suddenly smaller, the air thinner, as if I'd been moved out and didn't know it yet. I held my napkin, thought of June's careful handwriting and Walter's steady hands, and heard myself say the simplest thing I knew to be true: the house is mine to protect. Brooke's chair scraped the floor. The rest happened fast, and the night split into a before and after. Later, when the apartment was quiet again and the lasagna had gone cold on the counter, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and hovered over a folder I hadn't touched since the funeral. The file name waited in plain letters, one word I knew would change everything when I clicked it: deed. I sat at my desk well past midnight, the soft glow of the monitor brushing across old papers I'd tucked away after the funeral. The file I opened first was labeled in all caps, "Will. Final." I hadn't touched it in years, not since June passed. But that night my hands didn't tremble. I clicked through the scanned documents line by line until I reached the section I remembered, the house named in full and left to me alone. Their message was clear: to our granddaughter Grace, who gave more love than we ever asked for. I took a slow breath, leaned back in my chair, and opened the folder labeled Deed. I found the notarized copy and the transfer details signed, witnessed, and filed 3 years ago. There was no ambiguity. The house was mine, legally, fully, unquestionably mine. The irony was I never talked about it, not once flaunted it. Brooke had always dismissed the place as outdated. My parents rarely mentioned it at all, and now suddenly it was a point of contention big enough to throw me out over. The next morning, I called Naomi Blake from work. She'd been my sounding board for years, a practical voice when everything else got messy. I kept it brief, just told her what had happened and that I needed help. She didn't hesitate. "You need to speak to someone who knows real estate law. Now, not later." She texted me a number and told me to use her name. "She's sharp. Her name's Sharon Keene. She won't let anyone push you around." By noon, I was on the phone with Sharon explaining everything. I stuck to the facts, the will, the property, my family staying there without agreement, the confrontation. Her voice didn't waver. "Send me the will and the deed. If everything checks out, we'll take the next step." And Grace, if they're staying there without your permission, we're not talking about awkward family visits. We're talking about squatters. I sent over the files that afternoon. Within 2 hours, she called back. "I've reviewed everything. The will is solid, 3 witnesses notarized, no red flags. The deed was filed properly. Your grandparents even included a medical affidavit verifying their mental clarity. That's rare and it's excellent protection." I asked what could be done. Her answer came quickly. "You can post a 72-hour notice. After that, you have the right to remove them, or sell the property entirely. They've been staying there under the assumption you wouldn't act, but you can, and frankly, you should." I hung up and just sat for a while, my hands folded in my lap. I remembered an email from my mother a few months earlier asking about the internet wiring at the house. She'd claimed it was for Brooke's startup. Around the same time, my dad sent a message about converting the garage, saying it'd be perfect for Brooke's project equipment. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now the pattern was too clear to ignore. Later that night, I pulled out a shoebox from the hall closet, the one I'd filled with keepsakes from the house after June passed. Under a photo of us in the garden, I found the short letter she'd left me tucked behind the frame. I already knew the words by heart. "This house holds our love. Let it protect you when we're no longer here." Her handwriting was small but steady. That sentence stayed with me as I folded the letter and placed it beside the deed on the table. The next day, I ran the property value through a calculator built into an app I'd helped design years ago. When I inherited the house, it was worth around $200,000, but the neighborhood had changed. Tech companies had moved in, housing prices had doubled, then tripled. The estimate that came back stunned me, just under $1 million. I sat quietly with that number for a few minutes, then picked up the phone and called Sharon again. "I'm considering selling," I said. She didn't sound surprised. "I can draw up a contract within a week," she replied. "Do you have buyers in mind?" I didn't, not then. But that night I logged into my real estate networks and sent out a message to a local contact. 2 days later, I had a response from a young couple, Emily and David Reed, who were eager to raise their kids in a neighborhood with trees and old gardens. They had visited the house, once seen my grandparents' rose bushes, and written a letter asking to buy it if it ever went on the market. I didn't tell my family, not yet. Sharon and I worked quietly filing paperwork, confirming the buyer's loan approval, scheduling inspections. I went back to the house alone a few times to check the systems I'd coded, the smart lights, the heating schedule, the door locks. Everything still worked the way I'd programmed it. I imagined Emily walking her children down the garden path. I imagined laughter coming from the porch again. Sharon drafted the final sale documents. The offer was strong, $850,000 full financing approved, closing in 4 weeks. I signed my name at the bottom, and we set a delivery date for the formal notice. Sharon would send everything: the signed sale agreement, a certified copy of the will, and a 72-hour eviction letter. The package would arrive on a Monday morning. Naomi and I met for lunch the weekend before. She reached across the table and rested her hand over mine. "You did the right thing," she said. "They counted on you to stay quiet. You didn't." I nodded but said nothing. I still didn't know how my family would react, but I knew the reaction didn't matter. The truth was in ink now, in signatures and county records. The house I'd kept alive was moving on to a new family, and I was moving on too. The package went out on a Friday morning. Sharon double-checked the address and slipped the certified copies into a thick envelope, the will, the signed sale contract, and the eviction notice. She handed it off to the courier herself. "They'll get it by Monday," she said. "You'll want to give them space after that." I thanked her, then turned off my phone for the weekend. I spent that Sunday clearing out my closet. Not for the house, that part was done. I was packing for a tech conference in Portland, the kind of event I used to dream about but rarely prioritized. My budgeting app had landed me a slot on the main schedule, and I didn't want to miss it. It felt like the right time to leave town, even just for a few days. By Monday afternoon, the alert started. Naomi sent a message first. Package delivered. Get ready. I didn't check my voicemail until late that night back at my hotel. My mother's voice was first unsteady and fast. Grace, what is this? What's going on with the house? Then Brooke more clipped, angrier. You can't do this. You're making a mistake. My father left only one message. Call me. I didn't reply. I turned the ringer off and focused on my keynote prep. The next morning, I stood in front of a quiet room, clicker in hand, walking through the app I'd spent months refining. The same hands that signed the sale papers flipped through charts and demo screens without shaking. I finished with a clean close and walked back to my seat, not once thinking about what was happening back in Seattle. Later that day, Sharon called. They opened the package, she said. Your mom's been calling the office nonstop. Brooke has an attorney, someone named Victor Hale. She paused. He's aggressive, but it won't matter. The will's protected. We're past the contest period by almost 3 years. I asked what came next. Sharon's tone didn't change. They have 72 hours to vacate. If they don't, the sheriff can step in. The Reeds take possession in 3 weeks. That night, I walked the river path behind my hotel and tried to picture it Brooke in the guest room she claimed as an office, Elaine rereading the will, Martin saying nothing at all. They had always assumed the house was negotiable, just one more thing I'd eventually hand over. This time, I hadn't. The next morning, I received an email from Victor Hale. His subject line read, Urgent House Dispute. The message was short and formal. My client believes the property was intended for shared family use and may seek legal remedy. I forwarded it to Sharon, who replied within the hour. There's no case. He's posturing. Then another message. He's backing down. Naomi called that night. Brooke's lawyer just dropped her, she said. He told her she had no legal ground. She hesitated. Your parents are trying to get the rest of the family involved. I think you should prepare for that. I thanked her and ended the call. I already knew what was coming next. By Thursday, I was back in Seattle. My apartment felt smaller than I remembered, but quieter too. I made tea and listened to new voicemails. Brooke had posted on social media calling me vindictive. My mother left a string of texts about betrayal and family shame. A cousin I hadn't seen in years emailed me with a long paragraph about breaking tradition. I didn't respond. Instead, I answered a different message, one from Emily Reed. She and David had visited the house again that morning. The garden's even more beautiful than we remembered, she wrote. We can't wait to make it our home. I replied simply thanking them for their kind words. That weekend, Naomi and I met at a corner cafe. She set her phone down and said, They're scrambling. Brooke's posting about sleeping in a motel. Your parents are asking people to call you on their behalf. I sipped my coffee. The eviction clock was almost out. In 2 days, they'd have to leave or someone in uniform would make them. Sharon confirmed the paperwork again on Monday. It's all valid. There's nothing left for them to argue. They either move now or face enforcement. I asked her to send me a final update when the house was turned over. She promised she would. I spent that night in the living room, lights off, listening to rain tap the window. The house that had held every piece of my childhood was no longer mine to carry. It would belong to someone else now, someone who saw its worth without needing to tear it away from me. I spent most of that week off social media. I didn't scroll, didn't post, didn't read the tags Naomi said were piling up. Instead, I went back through old folders on my laptop, photos, scanned letters, tiny video clips that hadn't been touched in years. I found one from the fall before June passed. The porch was lit by string lights, and she was teaching me how to adjust the irrigation timer in the garden. Walter was in the background humming sorting screws into an old Folgers tin. Every system needs balance, she said, turning a dial, even the ones that run quietly. That night, I opened the drawer where I kept the letter she left me. Her words were written in that soft blue ink she always used for notes. "This house is yours, Grace, because you showed up. You listened, you stayed, you cared. Keep it safe and keep going." I read it through twice, then folded it back into the envelope and returned it to its place. The next morning, I drove out to the edge of the neighborhood, just past where the sidewalks narrow and the street dips near the big oak tree. The Reeds weren't scheduled to move in for another week, but I wanted to walk the yard one last time. The gate still squeaked. The porch smelled like rain and wood. I checked the lock, then stood under the awning as a breeze stirred the garden beds. The roses were blooming again, late but bright. By the time I got back to the car, my phone had picked up service. 4 new texts. One was from Naomi, "Don't panic, just read." She'd forwarded a screenshot of a message from my mother to our extended family. The tone was formal, almost rehearsed. "Due to recent misunderstandings, our daughter Grace has sold the Parker home without our consent. The matter is being handled." I sat in the driver's seat and stared at it. Handled was the word she used when she didn't want to explain anything. Later that evening, I called Sharon. She wasn't surprised. "They're trying to control the narrative," she said. "It's not uncommon. But legally, they're out of time and out of options." I asked again about enforcement. She repeated it slowly. "If they're not out by Friday, the sheriff will serve the notice. But I don't think it'll come to that." It didn't. That Friday morning, just before 10, I got a final email from Sharon. Confirmed property vacated. Keys collected. Transfer complete. I closed the message and let the silence sit for a while. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just turned off the lamp beside me and went to make coffee. That weekend, Naomi and I met again. We sat outside a bakery near Capitol Hill, jacket zipped coffee warm between our hands. "They didn't post anything else," she said. "No new updates. It's quiet now." I nodded. We watched a pair of kids run past on the sidewalk, one of them waving a red balloon. The city moved on, and so did I. But the quiet didn't last. On Monday, Naomi texted again. Brooke's business website had gone offline, and her name was no longer listed on the fitness startup registry. A day later, someone sent me a thread from a housing forum. Brooke had defaulted on a loan connected to her LLC, and the state had placed a lien on her equipment. The comment under the thread said it plainly, "Tenant evicted, assets repossessed." My father's name showed up next, listed on a public bankruptcy filing from the previous year. It linked back to a refinancing agreement tied to their house, according to the records they'd borrowed against it to help fund Brooke's business. Now, with her credit gone and the funds dried up, they couldn't make the monthly payments. The foreclosure notice had already been posted. I sat in my kitchen scrolling through each document slowly, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the quiet. One file led to another, each one confirming what Sharon had hinted at. They'd gambled on Brooke's second or third big venture, hoping the return would patch everything else. But nothing had landed. By Thursday, a local blog picked up the story. It wasn't about me, they never mentioned my name, but it referenced the property sale, the family tension, and the collapse of Brooke's business. They called it a cautionary tale of estate decisions gone wrong. Comments were closed by noon. That weekend, I walked past the old house. The Reeds were already there. A kid's tricycle sat near the fence, and the porch light had been updated. I didn't stop. I just kept walking, hands in my coat pockets, head down against the breeze. When I got home, I found a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was softer this time. "Grace, we'd like to talk. We didn't mean for things to fall apart this way. Please, just let us explain." I played it once, then deleted it. On Wednesday morning, I got a call from Naomi, just as I was pouring my first cup of coffee. "You might want to sit down," she said, not sounding dramatic, just tired. Brooke had posted a video to her old business channel framing the situation as a betrayal. She didn't mention my name, but the story was close enough to trace. She wore a hoodie, spoke softly, and claimed she'd been forced out of her childhood home. The comments were filled with strangers offering support. A few cousins shared it, adding their own versions of what had happened. That afternoon, a former coworker from my first job texted, "Did you really evict your own family?" I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I didn't post a rebuttal. Sharon had told me weeks ago not to play into anything that wasn't legal or documented. "You already did what matters," she'd said. "Let the rest roll by." But some things didn't roll. They stuck. Elaine sent a string of voicemails, all in the same flat tone, part confusion, part guilt. "You've made your point. Can we at least talk?" Martin called once, just once, and left a message that lasted under 10 seconds. "You've gone too far, Grace. I hope it was worth it." The pressure came in waves. A second-hand invitation to a family gathering I hadn't been part of in years. A handwritten note left at my door with no return address. A forwarded email from one of Brooke's friends calling me ruthless for taking back what had never been given away. I saved nothing. I kept walking past the noise. At the end of that week, a reporter from a local lifestyle blog reached out. She said she was writing a piece on intergenerational housing transitions and wanted my perspective. I declined politely. The article ran anyway using anonymous sources and vague references. A historic craftsman in Seattle's North End changes hands after family dispute. No names, no quotes. But I still got emails from readers guessing the details. One morning, I took the bus across town to meet with a developer about a project Naomi and I had been working on, an education platform to teach young students how to code using games and guided prompts. We'd been sketching the concept for months, but with the house sale finalized, I had the funds to build it properly. We sat at a small table with our laptops open, going over mock-ups. Outside the window, kids walked by with backpacks and bike helmets, their voices loud and free. "You think they'd use it?" Naomi asked, tapping her screen. I nodded. "They just need someone to show them where to start." That evening, I opened the savings account tied to the house deposit. I moved a large portion into a separate business account with Naomi listed as co-founder. We registered the LLC that same week. I didn't tell anyone in my family. There was nothing left to explain. On Sunday, I visited the garden center off Rainier and picked out 5 rose plants, pale pink, like the ones June always favored. I brought them home and spent the afternoon digging along the side of my new place. The soil was rocky, but manageable. I added compost, pressed each root ball into place, and watered them slowly. By dusk, the yard smelled faintly of damp earth and something old I couldn't quite name. I sat on the back steps, wiped my hands on my jeans, and watched the light shift across the fence. There were no voicemails waiting. No texts. Nothing new on Brooke's page. That night, I framed the letter from June. I didn't hang it yet. I just leaned it against the wall beside my desk. The next morning, I woke up and opened my laptop to find the beta version of our platform had gone live. We already had 42 downloads. It wasn't much, but it was real. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I just sat for a moment and watched the screen. A week after the app launched, I got a notification from the hosting dashboard, new registrations from 3 school districts, 2 in-state and 1 in Colorado. Naomi called me 10 minutes later, laughing. "We're on someone's radar," she said. We stayed on the phone for an hour, going over user feedback, most of it positive. One teacher had written that her 6th graders were already tinkering with their own code snippets, using our templates. "They want more modules," Naomi said. "We need to scale." That same afternoon, I passed by the old neighborhood on my way to a meeting. The craftsman looked different now. Emily had painted the trim a soft navy, and the garden beds were freshly edged. I didn't stop, but I did slow down. There were chalk drawings on the sidewalk, hopscotch squares, and a stick figure family with the word home above them in crooked letters. A cardboard sign near the porch read, "Thank you, Miss Grace." I kept driving. By Friday, word had gotten around. Brooke's business license had been formally dissolved. Her personal accounts vanished. One of her former vendors tagged her in a thread about unpaid invoices, and someone else reposted her earlier video, the one where she said I'd stolen her future. Comments had shifted. Support was quieter. Questions were louder. Then the profile went dark. Naomi texted me that night. She's off everything. No post, no story, nothing in 48 hours. Elaine's number popped up again the next morning. I let it ring. The voicemail that followed was longer than the others. She sounded tired, like the fight had drained out of her. Your father and I are moving. We lost the house. There's a small rental near the bus line. Not much light. I just thought you should know. She didn't ask for anything. She just ended with, I hope you're well. That weekend, the neighborhood forum lit up. A foreclosure notice on my parents' old home had gone public. Someone shared a photo of the front yard, the once manicured hedges now overgrown a lockbox on the front door. The comments were quiet but curious. Didn't they host book club there? Someone asked. Another reply. Sad. Never thought they'd go under. I turned off the screen and went outside. The rose bushes I'd planted were blooming stronger than I expected. I cut 3 stems and brought them inside. The fragrance was clean and familiar, and for a moment I could almost hear June humming at the kitchen sink. That Monday, Naomi and I were invited to speak at a community roundtable on tech access for underfunded schools. We presented our platform and demoed the adaptive coding tracks we'd designed for middle schoolers. A retired principal came up afterward, asked about our early access model, and offered to connect us with a district in Oregon. You two built something real, she said. You didn't wait for a gate to open. You just made your own door. That night I got one final voicemail from Brooke. Her voice cracked halfway through. I'm done, Grace. I can't fix this. I don't even know where to go. Then silence. No apology. No mention of what came before. I listened to the message once, deleted it, and turned off the lamp. The next morning I signed a lease on a new bungalow in the eastern part of the city. Smaller yard, simpler layout, but enough space to work and rest without ghosts in the walls. The first thing I packed was June's framed letter. The second was the garden tools she left me. The new house was quiet in a way I hadn't expected. No creaking floorboards like the ones at the Parker place. No shadows shaped by memory. Just clean walls, soft light, and a hallway that echoed when I walked through it barefoot. I spent the first week unpacking slowly, setting books on shelves, lining kitchen drawers, planting rosemary near the back fence. Every box I opened felt like a line crossed a quiet final step into something that belonged only to me. Naomi came over on a Sunday with takeout and a stack of notebooks. We spread everything across the dining table and talked through the next update for our platform. User numbers had tripled in a month. Teachers were emailing us directly, now asking for content tailored to rural schools, ESL learners, students with disabilities. We wrote down every request, every idea. Then she reached for her tea, leaned back, and said, "You know, June would have loved this." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I nodded. She'd probably be annoyed it took me this long. That same night, I got a package in the mail, no return label, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from Elaine. Inside was an old photo album, one of the thick leather-bound ones she used to keep on the coffee table. Taped to the first page was a yellow sticky note. "You might want this. I don't have room for it anymore." I flipped through slowly. There were birthday pictures, school concerts, one of June and Walter sitting with me in the garden. I left the album closed on the shelf. I didn't throw it away. A few days later, Sharon forwarded me an article from the county records office. The title was generic, something about foreclosure trends in residential areas, but one line listed my parents by name, noting the bankruptcy filing and surrender of their property. It was official. The home was no longer theirs. It had been reassigned, sold quietly to a bank-owned developer. There was no mention of where they'd gone. By the end of the month, I stopped checking Brooke's social pages. They were still inactive. No new business filings, no press releases, no LinkedIn updates. Naomi asked once if I'd heard anything more. I shook my head. "No," I said. "And I think that's the end of it." The last thing to arrive was a printed thank you note from the Reed family. Emily's handwriting was neat, the card simple. The house feels like it's always been ours. The kids love the smart system. The garden is blooming. We hope to honor everything that came before. I pinned the card on the corkboard near my desk. Later that week, Naomi and I stood outside a community center, watching as a group of middle schoolers tested the beta version of our latest module. They crowded around the laptops, laughing, pointing, trying to outcode one another. One of the instructors turned to us and said, "Whatever you two are doing, don't stop." Naomi glanced at me and smiled. "We won't." When I got home that night, the street was quiet. A breeze moved through the trees and the air smelled faintly of rosemary and soil. I turned off the porch light, locked the door behind me, and stood for a while in the middle of the living room. It was mine. All of it. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I built it piece by piece after everything else had been taken. 2 months after the move, the last box was finally unpacked. I stood in the doorway of my small office, taking in the framed photo of June and Walter beside my monitor, the soft hum of the new air purifier, the faint scent of rosemary from the windowsill. The house didn't creak, didn't carry echoes. It felt like a place meant for starting over and staying. Our app passed 5,000 downloads that week. Naomi and I had a quiet dinner to mark the moment, nothing fancy. Just 2 friends sitting on a porch eating takeout under string lights, remembering how far we'd come from scribbled sketches on napkins. She asked if I missed the old place. I thought for a while before answering. "I don't miss the walls," I said. "But I think about the people who filled it." That weekend I took a walk near the park where Walter used to fly kites with us when we were little. A girl passed by with a cardboard robot she'd built, proudly explaining how she'd programmed the lights. Her dad walked behind her smiling. It made me think of those long afternoons at June's kitchen table, where I first learned how wires carried power, how words could make a screen respond, how the smallest effort could shape something lasting. I never heard from Brooke again. Her number stayed blocked, her accounts quiet. Last I knew, she'd moved to a shared apartment on the other side of town, working odd shifts and keeping low. Elaine tried once more, a letter this time, but I left it unopened. There was nothing left to untangle. Martin never reached out again. The house Emily and David bought looked beautiful when I passed it last. The roses were tall, and someone had added a small wooden sign to the garden gate, Parker's Patch. I smiled. They'd kept the name. Somewhere in that house, a new family was building something of their own, with laughter, with sunlight, with care. June's letter still sits on my desk, folded neatly in a small frame. I read it once a week without meaning to. Just a glance, just a reminder. Keep it safe, and keep going. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't the fight. It was finally believing I didn't have to prove I deserved what had already been entrusted to me. That quiet kind of justice, the kind that doesn't need an audience, is the one that stays. If you've listened all the way through, thank you. I hope this story found you at the right time. If you've ever had to reclaim something that should have been yours all along, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Take care and keep going.